Okay, there we go.
Oh,
All right. Okay, let me click the slideshow button. Sorry, a little bit slow. Okay, here we go. So this was presented in July, and we're going to redo it again now. The one thing, just FYI, we are still F1 higher, but our logo has changed. And just in case you're wondering, we are still around and here to help you. So our agenda today, we're going to talk about what the H-1B visa is, the eligibility requirements, the procedure, how you might prepare. And then I do feel it's important for you to at least know the costs, although usually your employer shoulders that burden. Some problems you might experience. What happens if you don't get selected for the lottery or if your H-1B is denied? Additional things to keep in mind. And then, should you be fortunate enough to get an H-1B visa, what you should really be thinking about. Now, as you are aware, these rules and regulations regarding immigration change at any time. And next week is going to be a very critical week as the administration changes over. So just be aware and make sure you're checking the USCIS websites as the new administration comes in. Okay. So the H-1B visa is a work visa for I don't really know how someone was writing on the screen. It is a work visa and it is for specialty occupations. There are educational requirements. So if you don't have a certain type of degree, you cannot qualify for the H-1B visa. It requires that your employer sponsors you. So you need to have an employer. You can't just decide, I am going to, on my own, with no job, apply for an H-1B visa. There are duration limits. It is subject to an annual cap. That's why there is a lottery system in play. And it is part of a path to permanent residency or your green card in the United States. So specialty occupation requirement, that means you need to have a job offer in a specialty occupation that requires specialized knowledge. So oftentimes the students that we talk to that are international students, it's the STEM fields, but not exclusive. Okay. You typically will need to be eligible for the lottery at least a bachelor's degree or higher in the specific specialty or its equivalent. So work experience can count, but it is a much steeper hill to climb. So educational qualifications are very integral. Like I said before, a US employer must offer you a job and be willing to file your H-1B petition. You can't do it on your own. Um, so employers on the employer end, they have to complete a labor condition application, which states that they are going to pay you the prevailing wage. And by hiring you, they are not taking a job away from a domestic American worker. Um, of all of the H-1B spaces, if you have a master's degree, an additional 20,000 visas are reserved for those with master's degree. So your chances are a little tiny bit higher. And like I said before, in some cases, education, specialized training, work experience can be considered equivalent to the U.S. bachelor's degree in the specialty field. However, I myself have no experience with those, what those cases are, so I cannot speak to that. All right, moving on. So the procedure. The employer after they hire you, they file the H-1B application and the LCA on your behalf. And there is a timeline. They also file, so they can't be at any time. They also file the I-129 form with USCIS, and they include the necessary documentation and fees. So the petition will include things like your diplomas and transcripts, the job description that says why this is a specialty position that only you or someone with your qualifications can fulfill, and documentation that they will pay the required wage. So they cannot undercut the pay that is set by the Department of Labor. USCIS will then review your petition and your supporting documents to determine if you are eligible. We will talk about this, but sometimes they require additional evidence. I will talk about that in a little bit. And if the petition is approved, you will get a Form I-797 notice of action. You would then go to apply officially for your H-1B visa at a U.S. embassy or a consulate in your home country, and you will be submitting the relevant forms, typically right now DS-160, and attend a visa interview. Okay. So it is important, if you are in school right now, great. You can start thinking about having this information filed separately. If you are on the jump hunt, if you already graduated, just make sure you start gathering these these pieces of information while you job hunt. So the the filing window begins in April 1, and you want to gather your important documents, your transcripts, things like that. A resume is always useful. Make sure that your employer is aware of the H-1B process and their responsibilities. So if they've hired you, they probably know that you will need work sponsorship. So you need to have the conversation with them about the process, what you need to gather, and they probably will have an attorney who you will work with. The employer should then be prepared to file your LCA and your I-129 forms. The the documentations that you're going to be collecting include your education credentials, diplomas, and transcript. If they require work experience letters, make sure you have those in hand. Do not wait until the last minute. Any certifications and professional licenses. So if you need to get copies of those, make sure you order them sooner rather than later. We highly advise hiring an immigration attorney to help you navigate this process to make sure that all your paperwork is completed. Oftentimes, your employer has someone they've already worked with intentionally. The employer then needs to determine the prevailing wage for your position. So, a computer scientist in California has to make X amount of money. So, they need to pay you that higher wage. And that is part of that H-1B visa requirement of the employer. Um, you'll want to talk to your employer about what costs they absorb and what costs you absorb so that you can plan for the costs that are associated with the H-1B process. And then really do think about, because the chances are slimmer every year, what you're going to do if your H-1B petition is not selected for the lottery, or even if it's selected is denied. What are your options if you want to stay in the US? You don't need to really worry about a whole bunch of this, but I think it's important to have it. So feel free to screenshot it. These are what the fees are when I put this slide together in the middle of last year. So the basic filing fees, you'll see it's hefty. It's not, $10. Attorney fees can range from $1,500 to $5,000 or even more, depending on how complex your case is. There are things like processing fees that can speed things up along the way, and of course, filing fees. And in case you have to travel to do a visa interview, that will need to be accounted for depending on where you need to also go. If you have credentials that are from a foreign institution, so suppose your bachelor's degree was in a different country, you probably will have to get those evaluated so that they can be translated into understandable ranges and readability for USCIS, so be prepared to absorb those costs as well. Okay. There are always problems. It's a governmental process, so problems always occur, but hopefully not to you. But if they do, let me just make sure you are briefed on what these things could be. Um, so USCIS may get your application and go, you know what? We don't have enough information and we need a little bit more. This is called an RFE, a request for evidence. So they will tell you what they're looking for. But the moment you get this, you need to open that email or open that letter and look at it right away and talk to your immigration attorney, because the turnaround time is very short. So don't expect them to give you 6 months to find the information. And again, we advise you use an immigration specialist because they have encountered RFEs before with other cases they handle. You yourself probably have not. So you want to make sure you're up to date with that immigration specialist consultation. If you are applying for your H-1B and you suddenly get offered another opportunity to work with a different employer who's also willing to sponsor your H-1B. Congratulations, it's great because you have another opportunity. However, there may be some delays, some gaps in your authorization to work in the US, and there will be times when you cannot legally work. So you must be aware if you're going to be job hunting while your H-1B application is in process, you need to make sure of when you can and cannot work. If your H-1B status changes, so for example, if you are laid off or your visa expires, this can affect your status, obviously. But also, if you have dependents, if you have a spouse, it can affect their work authorization. So be aware of that if you are an attached person whose work authorization is connected to you. If you need to extend your H-1B visa, that can be challenging, especially if there are changes in your position, your employer, and your location. You can't just change jobs and expect the clock to start all over from the very beginning. So be aware of that. And like I said at the very beginning, immigration, visa, policies, regulations change quickly, rapidly, all the time, depending on what is going on in the United States. So be aware of that. And oftentimes, as part of the RFE, the USCIS will require employers to somehow demonstrate that this position that they are hiring you for is specialized. Only someone like you can do it. And this can be criteria that's challenging for some employers to meet. All right. So there are two situations. You apply for the lottery, and if you apply for the lottery and you're selected for the lottery, then you can apply for the H-1B visa. Then when you apply for the H-1B visa, you can be granted the visa or not granted the visa. So the first step is that lottery. Um, so if you are not selected for the lottery, which means, okay, this year you can't apply for the H-1B visa, figure out why. Review the denial notice and understand why you were denied so you can keep this in mind if you want to apply for the lottery again next year. While you can file an appeal or a motion to reopen the case with USCIS, if there was new evidence or an error, you can definitely do that, again, with your hand held by an immigration specialist. Of course, you can reapply the next year, and you want to make sure you know why you were denied. And during the year of waiting to reapply, address those issues. There are potentially other visa categories that might be applicable to your situation, so you can take a look into those. We have blogged on alternate visa options at the F1 Hire blog website, so please take a look there for more information. The other thing you could do is expand where you're searching for your job. You can look at CAP exempt opportunities. So these organizations are not held to any quotas or limitations as to how many H-1Bs can be issued. And so these are typically universities or nonprofit research institutions. Both great places to work. It reduces the worry about the H-1B cap, and oftentimes larger institutions, that larger nonprofit institutions and universities actually have greater benefits for you. So just keep that in mind on a practical scale. Always consulting an attorney. That's a great idea to understand additional options, how to strengthen your future applications, what you did wrong, what was missing, things like that, to make yourself stronger that second time around. Make sure you maintain your legal status. So if you aren't selected for the lottery, do not fall out of status in the United States. That will hurt you if you try to reapply for the H-1B the following year. So keep that in mind. Always maintain your legal status. And oftentimes people will spend that 1 year engaging in more professional development to become more specialized in their field, to gain certifications, which can potentially strengthen that future H-1B application. On. So that was if it was the lottery that was denied. Yes, if the lottery, you did not get selected. What if your H-1B is denied? It's a sad day. And so you take a day to mull it over and be sad, but then you have to really start thinking about the next steps. First of all, I want to stay in the US. So, of course, I'm going to be determined to reapply again next year for the H-1B. Like I said before, you should explore capped exempt opportunities because this will open up more chances for you. So keep that in mind. Like I said before, same with when you don't get the lottery, look at alternate visa options. What else could you potentially do with your company? Um, and then if you want to, you can also go back and re-enroll in another program. So be an F1 student again. If you have a spouse who has an H-1B, you can apply for the dependent visa um, on an H or an L, depending on what your spouse has. There is also the option of remote working for your US employer from your home country if they offer you that option. We are not super familiar with this, but Canadian work permits, could be a possibility. However, watching the news recently, I don't know how feasible that is at the moment, but Canada's a lovely place. So if you want to explore that, definitely think about speaking to an immigration specialist over in Canada. And again, always consult an attorney. I feel like I've put that a lot on here. Okay. Additional things to keep in mind. Your spouse and unmarried children under 21 can accompany you to the US under the H4 visa category, so you don't have to be alone here. Um, if you are in the US and you have an H-1B visa and you want to go out of the country, be aware of what you need to take with you and what you will need to present as evidence to come back into the United States. So be very cautious. Um, like I said before, you can change employers while you have an H-1B visa, but you want to make sure your new employer is going to be able to file the H-1B visa on your behalf. So if you're with, say, IBM right now, they are used to filing H-1B visas. Suppose you get a job offer from a tiny company which has never, ever filed an H-1B visa before. You want to make sure that they are going to hire an expert to help you through that process. There is always an ongoing debate regarding lottery-based selection process, and because it's one part of the H-1B visa conversation. The concerns when it comes to the H-1 visas, what people argue about on either side is one, that hiring foreign workers displaces American workers. Thus, the people who advocate for the H-1B must defend it. And two, the other side is that this can exploit foreign workers. So there may be some employers in the US who choose to hire foreign workers to pay them less and not pay them the prevailing wage. So that is also another concern. If you are an H-1B worker and you are being underpaid, there is recourse for you. So be aware of that. Okay. Um, the H-1B visa program faces constant scrutiny. A couple weeks ago on X, there were conversations between a couple of influential people about whether H-1Bs are good for America or bad for America. And we sort of don't know right now. We're in limbo about what's going to happen with the next administration. So we are big proponents of international non-domestic workers to be a part of the talent pool. That is what we at F1 Hire believe. And we are hopeful that the new administration will also agree with that. After your H-1B is the H-1B visa is approved, hurrah, throw a party, have some champagne or have a soda if you don't drink. Make sure you are aware when exactly you can start working and when your last day is. It is very important. You are an adult now. It's not someone else's job to tell you when you need to stop working. You need to know your dates. Maintain your status. So do your job and do your job well. If you decide to move or you from a different house, or if you decide to move to a different job, make sure you update USCIS right away. Make sure that your employer has filed that LCA saying they're not displacing American workers, stating your prevailing wage and that they will pay you that amount of money. Always keep your pay stubs and tax records. Just Most times now they're electronic, so just download them every month, file them in a folder on your computer. If you plan to travel outside the US, make sure you have valid visa stamps on your passport for your reentry. Bring whatever documents you think you might need to present. If you have dependents, a spouse, children, make sure their visas are valid. That is your responsibility. And if your long term goal is to become a naturalized US citizen, to get a green card, permanent residency, make sure you discuss this with your attorney and also discuss this with your employer if they will be part of that process as well. Keep on top of legal advice and USCIS changes. Set up a Google alert for yourself if you need to. And that I think is pretty much all I have to say. I went through it very fast. Um, but you can watch this again and you'll have access to the slides. And so if you have questions, feel
Yes,
free
we
to
do.
ask.
We have a lot of questions.
Oi, okay.
And
Let me go back. Let me scroll to the top. Okay. Can multiple companies?
yes, we're going to share the recording to everyone who registered. I will send a follow-up email with the recording link with the slides as well. You won't get the slides, but it will be recorded in the recording. So you will review the slides again. You will be able to do that. Yeah. Okay, go ahead, Dr. Chu.
Sure. So Minna, feel free to jump in if you have other things to say when I answer these questions. So the first question that I see is, can multiple companies file H-1B for one candidate? So first of all, if you have multiple offers, congratulations, because it is a tough market out there and you must be superb. The application is not by company, it's by one person. So it's one person, one time. But if you want to move to a different company, an additional company will file on your behalf.
Yeah, so
Minna,
the
any
answer would
comments?
be yes. Yes, multiple company can sponsor the same candidate if you have multiple companies are willing to do that. So that will increase the chance,
Wait.
of course, and you will get more chance to get the lottery. But it also increase the fraud concerns because USCIS, as I know, they're watching that types of case because there's a certain companies that are using this method to sponsor the same candidates, and there's a fraud possibility. So you might have to think about that. And also, there
Oh,
could be more cost to do that.
okay. So,
Yeah,
so Minna, what you're saying is at the same moment, 10 companies can sponsor my H-1B because
yeah,
they're
yeah.
interested. Okay. All right.
Technically,
So,
yes, yeah,
okay.
can
So
do that, but there's a fraud possibility. Yeah,
okay.
it's pretty risky to do that.
Okay. So I stand
Yeah,
corrected. Yes, you can, but fraud. And then once you get flagged for that, it kind of stays with
right.
your name, even if you weren't, even if it wasn't a fraud situation, just be aware of that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Second question is, aren't there reserved 20,000 for those who complete a master's? Yes, I did say that already. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yes, this is going to be recorded so that you can gain access to it. If a spouse gets approved for the H-1, does that confer any status on the partner? So it would be an H-4 that they could apply for, and that would allow them to work in many cases. You will get a denial notice for the H-1B visa. Yes. Do they get a denial notice for the lottery? Like an explanation of why they were denied?
No, there's no explanation on
Oh,
that, but you will
okay.
get a
Yeah.
denial
So
notice.
you'll get
Yeah.
your denials for both.
Yeah,
There's
that's
likely
random. So there's no reason. You're not
you're
lucky
just
enough.
denied. Yeah. So
Yeah.
lottery is typically it's just because your number didn't get pulled.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Right.
But this is where we say go talk to an immigration specialist also to see what else you could potentially do. Because if you only have a bachelor's degree, you can increase your odds slightly by doing a master's
Mm-hmm.
degree. Can you be enrolled for a doctorate program while being on an H-1B? If you are full-time enrolled in a program as an international student, you are an F1 student. You cannot carry a full course load while being H-1B because that's two full-time, in theory, two full-time
Yeah.
positions that
Right.
Americans don't usually do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If someone completed a master's from a US university, wants to quit their PhD, but they are not willing to provide masters in subsequent move from F. Okay. If someone has completed their master's from a US university, okay, so you have a master's degree. So and I guess they're in a PhD program but wants to leave the PhD program, but they are not willing to provide masters. Oh, so the PhD program, as I understand, the PhD program is not a terminal degree. So they have to roll it into the PhD program. That's how I'm understanding this question. Can he or she move from an F1 to an H1B, or does that require a complete PhD? So if you have already done your master's and you used your OPT, then it's done. Okay. If you are in a PhD program that does not allow you to get a second terminal master's, you can't get OPT because you don't get issued that degree. So you are considered ABD, all but dissertation. You didn't finish your PhD. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so you potentially could apply for the H-1B if you have an employer willing to give you a job and it works into their timeline, and they're willing to wait for you for that
Yeah.
timeline. So
Right.
that's, as I understand that question, that's how I interpreted it. Okay.
Yeah. Mm.
In terms of applying for the H-1B visa, what is the closing window for submissions? The dates are a little bit off every single year, but if you go to USCIS, you can definitely check and see what those dates are. Okay. Does salary play a big role in determination of H-1B eligibility? No, it doesn't. But um,
They do
the
have a
employer needs,
requirement. Yeah.
right. So the
Mhm.
prevailing wage. So the
Yes.
employer does need to file that LCA and commit to paying you what the industry, the Department of Labor has determined you must be paid at a minimum.
Yes.
So, and this is because suppose, I am an employer and I pay my current employee, my current American employee, $80,000 a year. I'm thinking, oh, maybe I can hire someone foreign and pay them $60,000 a year for the same amount of work. No, the government won't allow that. So there is a commitment from the employer that they will pay you whatever Department of Labor says is, appropriate and fair. This is to not take advantage of foreign workers, but also to not displace American workers. Okay. So I don't, correct me wrong. I don't think that's, is there part-time H-1B visa? I don't think so. I think it's all
Ye-
full-time, right? Or you can do two part-time,
yes. Yeah.
right?
They do have a part-time H-1B visa. Yes. Yeah.
Yes. But talk to an immigration specialist because we in
Right.
our company at F1 Hire, we have only worked with full-time H-1Bs.
Right.
So since my employer is new to H-1B process, congratulations, they hired you and they want you that much, so that's great. Can they register on my behalf? They have to. You can't do it yourself, so the employer has to
Yeah.
do that. And if picked for an honorary, can I reach out to an attorney for help further since the attorney fees are just for registration? You need to talk to your employer about how they want to do that, because oftentimes at some parts of the process, the employer must actually absorb the attorney fees. So you need to clarify what those are, which you are responsible for, and which they are responsible for, and then work with them. I would not go rogue on my own initially. I would talk to them to see their thoughts. If they say, oh, we'll pay for your lawyer, find whoever you want, great. But I would not go rogue and do it because this is also a newer employee for you, I'm guessing. So you want to make sure you work with them, not against them. Is there a salary maximum for the visa? Not that I am aware of.
No.
And if you surpass any salary maximums, congratulations. Let us know where that job is because we will join you. Um,
Okay.
can my spouse on the H4 work, and how soon can they do that? After they apply and get approved for
Not
the H4?
well, not into the H-1B holder are getting perm application and get the uh I-485, I think. That will be the status, not until that, which means the H-1B holder has to participate in the green card applicants and started to do enrolled in the green card applicants.
Okay. So
Yeah.
they have to have their H-1B, they have to be in the process of doing their PR, their
Green.
green card, in which
Yes.
the spouse can get the H-4. Once the H-4 is valid and that spouse gets their EAD, they can start working.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Very convoluted process, folks. Great questions.
Hmm.
Can I pause the H-1B visa to enroll for a school such as the MBA? Hmm. You can't. I've never known of anyone to pause.
Well, technically, you can. I think yeah. I think the answer would be yes. You can pause your
She is,
H-1B visa,
there is a
and you don't.
tentative yes. Yes.
Yes, and you don't have to go through the lottery again, as long as you've had H-1B visa, but you still need to find another employer after you graduate from your MBA to sponsor you the H-1B, but you don't have to go through the lottery again.
Okay.
Just
Very
from
good.
my understanding, I think that would be the case. Yeah.
Uh, Again, immigration specialist to confirm. Also,
Right. Yeah.
after the 20th, everything we said could change. Okay. So
Yeah. Right.
during OPT, is it recommended for an employee? Is it recommended for an employee? Okay, so the question is it okay? It basically the question is it okay to work to do my OPT with a person with an employer who doesn't sponsor H-1B? Okay. So there are many sides to this. If you can't find an H-1B sponsoring employer during your OPT period, you should take the OPT job because you will gain your experience in the United States. Make sure you do your job well so you get good recommendations for the job search for with an employer who will sponsor your H-1B visa. If you have an option, if you have two job options, one is okay, we're going to sponsor your OPT right away, your H-1B right away, but we're going to pay you less than your OPT person. Think about that. The H-1B is the more desirable long-term goal. So you may be willing to sacrifice that a little bit. So again, no matter what, work experience for international students is important. Get it any possible way you can. Minna, something to add?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Your brow is furrowed. So I'm like, oh no,
Yeah.
I'm saying something wrong. If I have an approved H-1B 6 years, can I work for non-H-1B companies knowing that they will not sponsor permanent residency green card?
No, I don't think so because as long as you
Wait, so they have an
because
H-1B, so they can work for,
but
no,
still you need
you need an
yeah,
H-1B.
still right, right.
You need to still work, you need to still work for a company that sponsors the
Yes.
H-1B
In
because,
your case, you have to transfer your H-1B visa to another employer, and that employer should be able to accept your H-1B visa, should be able to sponsor you.
right, because
Yeah.
you're still not a permanent resident or a green card holder.
Right.
You can't freely jump around jobs
Right.
like that. You are
Exactly. Yeah.
beholden to your legal work status.
Mhm.
Can you brief about H-1B filled by nonprofits and universities? How much duration does it have? So that depends. So H-1B positions at nonprofits and universities, they determine how long the job is. They determine what type of job it is. They work with the Department of Labor to determine your prevailing wage. So there is no answer to, okay, the jobs there are going to be 5 years. So sometimes with nonprofit institutions and universities, jobs are time limited. So a professor only has a grant for 3 years. And so you are aware of that. Um,
Mm.
but the application process is the same. The larger
Mhm.
institutions that you go to. So for example, if you went to Duke University, they have a lot of foreign workers, so they are aware of how to do that. So those are questions you can ask them. But when you get your job offer, you review in your letter how long that duration is, if it's at will. Most jobs in the United States are at will. Okay. What are the visa options for international RNs who have their Bachelor of Nursing from a university in the US? So you would need to check to ensure that the Bachelor of Nursing degree is considered a specialty occupation. If it is considered a specialty occupation at the bachelor's level, then you are eligible to apply for the H-1B visa. Um, if you if you have a spouse who has an H-1B, we've already talked about that. That is another option for you to eventually be an H4 worker in the U.S. Okay. And then we have talked about the other visa options, the F1, continuing in a master's programs, those sorts of things to become more specialized, which also can allow you to stay in the United States. CPT and day one CPT, not my area of specialty, but I can give you a cautionary. Some day one CPT programs are looked at skeptically. So make sure the one that you go to is an accredited, well-known one, not some obscure one that has set up a shop in a building somewhere with one room. Okay. So that there's been a lot of fraud issues around that. CPT happens while you are in school. It has to be a position that is deemed necessary for your education in your field. So if you have a bachelor's in nursing, it is a job that you must do or work or an internship that you must do to help you become a better RN. So it can't be like, oh, I'm going to get CPT and use it to make pottery. So it needs to be related to your schooling. So that is CPT. It's curricular, it's required for your education. EB3, not a question that I can answer. That is not a field that we are sort of touching. So please
Mhm.
do the research with an immigration specialist.
Yeah.
Since I'm already an H-1B worker and want to pursue a doctoral program, what's the procedure? Do I have to revert to an F1? So if you go full time into a doctor program, you will become an F1 student again.
Yes.
Odds are no PhD program is going to say, hey, it's okay for you to do the full time doctorate while also being an H-1B worker, because that's just usually no bueno. Okay. Can I
Yeah.
suppose?
Have we answered that?
Yes,
Yeah.
we've already answered that question. The H1, H4 question is positive sponsor. Yes, we've already answered the question for H-1B part-time. You cannot sponsor your own H-1B. We have said that multiple times. Where do we check for prevailing wage? You can do that at the Department of Labor. Just Google Department of Labor prevailing wage. For the specific dates, the lottery only happens once a year. You can Google search that, check on USCIS website for the specific periods of time. There is a window when you need to be entered into the lottery, and you need to make sure you are entered into the lottery in that window by your employer. Since there was a second lottery last year, what are the chances there will be a second lottery this year? We
We don't
cannot guess.
know.
We're not in the political administration, sadly. How can we report? How can we improve chances to get a good sponsor like IBM? Really, so Minna and I have reviewed a number of resumes through F1 Hire. First of all, you need to have a strong resume that actually is tailored to every single position. I encourage you to use the F1 Hire extension because it will help you look at your resume next to the job description so that you can put specific keywords into your resume. And because those keywords are what they are scanning for, you've only got a couple minutes to get someone's attention on the HRN because it's so easy to apply for jobs right now. So you want to make sure it's readable. You want to make sure keywords are highlighted or are on your resume. I do not advise with anything fancy. So no photo on your resume, no dual columns, no different colors, no crazy fonts. And also then if you have the time, you should be doing internships, work experiences, because a lot of resumes that we see are just course projects. And that is just not enough in a competitive environment. Okay. But definitely, at the very minimum you should do is tailor your resume to the job position and the F1 Hire extension. I'm not giving it a plug. I don't get paid extra for doing this. Will help you do that because it really just puts them side by side and you can just copy and paste and put the word into your resume. Okay. Are all employers eligible to file for H-1B visas? No. Okay, can an F2 dependent move F2 dependent move to H1. I don't know what an F2 dependent is.
That means F2 visa, I think. Move to H-1B if the person has a you still you have to go through the H-1B lottery,
Okay.
like the
So
employer
this is
sponsoring you and yeah, that process.
Can I have my own business under OPT? That is a great question because that is the answers out there are confusing. I do not believe you can. From my research and my consultations, you cannot because you are still in training. So you cannot be a business owner. However, some you feel free to do more research, but as I understand it, I cannot employ anyone as on OPT as an independent contractor who owns their own business. How can I qualify for H-1B visa when you're in Ghana with special skills? You need to find a US employer who is willing to sponsor your H-1B visa. Okay, so
Yeah.
um, you should be looking for employers who have a history of sponsoring the H-1B visa. And again, that is something the F1 hire extension can do for you because you are able to uh, uh, search for H-1B friendly employers.
Yeah.
Okay. How can I qualify for an H-1 visa when I'm like, oh, that was rejected. If you have an H, if you have H-1B visa and you lose your job, is there a specific time or grace period to secure a new job? There is a grace period, um, but I don't know exactly what it is. Is it 30 or is it
Not,
60?
grace period is 60 days,
I
I
think
think.
it's six.
Yeah.
As of now, we believe it is 60 days.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
again, make sure you double check if that were to happen. If a spouse becomes a permanent resident through the H-1B, does that also change the status of the dependents to permanent residents as
It
well?
won't change. It won't change automatically. Still, you have to apply for your spouse to change the status. So the answer would be yes. It can change the status, but you have to go through the application, the process, and everything. Apply for the permanent resident for your spouse as well.
What is the benefit of working in a state university in the administration department in terms of H-1B? Well, so there's no cap. So if they are willing to
Hmm.
sponsor you, if that's a sponsored position, then great, no cap. So you don't have to worry about
Yeah.
going through the lottery.
Yeah.
Um, and state university, depending on what state university, you know, frankly, often their benefits are great. So just something to keep in mind.
Hmm.
Can you apply for STEM OPT extension if your job is part-time but with an e-verified employer? STEM OPT. It
Uh,
has to be 20 hour. No, it has to be full-time? So you are correct in that OPT extension needs to be done with an e-verified employer.
yeah.
I do not have an answer if that position has to be part-time or full-time. But your e-verified employer should be able to give you that answer.
Right.
So there are some answers out there for questions. Feel free to use them. I'm not going to repeat them because I do not know the veracity of those particular
Hmm.
claims. So just FYI, you can read them if you would like. If I have a regular H-1B visa approved by, but then get it, then I have another job at the university. Should I apply for a new H-1B visa? No. So if you already have an H-1B, you don't even need to worry about, the lottery or anything like that. You just need to have your new
Transfer.
employer
Yeah.
transfer H-1B
Yeah.
to. So company
Right.
B needs to tell company A that you
Hmm.
are going to work with them now, and then you inform USCIS. Okay.
Yeah. It's hard to
And
outside US can anyone.
how do you vet for a good day one OPT university? You can do some Google searching to see if there have been any concerns online about them. And there are some institutions, for example, I think there is a state university in Kansas that offers day one CBT. They're a state university, that's fine. But there are for-profit universities that offer day one OPT, and those are the ones you need to vet more carefully. So do the research yourself on that. Okay. It's hard to find a
Uh,
sponsor from outside the US. We don't have any websites that we can share, except again, like I said, the F1 Hire extension will show you who has been non-domestic worker friendly in the past.
Yeah. And we do have a sponsorship H-1B job list available on our web extension as well as on our website. So that's a daily updated job list. But for only available for premium users, and for basic user, I think you will get like 10 jobs per day, something like that. You can check it out on our website.
One
What the
more
process
question.
like to,
What's
yeah,
the process like to
one last
transfer
question.
non What's the process like to transfer the non-cap H-1B to regular H-1B? You're already in the H-1B process, so I don't,
Oh,
go ahead.
but non-cap H-1B to regular H-1B, that's a little tricky. I actually don't know the answer. I've heard that uh, it's very easy for you to transfer from non-cap H-1B to regular H-1B. Like you don't have to go through the lottery and anything. It's
Right.
just like a regular transfer, but I'm not sure.
Yeah. I would think
Yeah.
that if you are in the H-1B process, it would not be a huge issue because
Mm,
you already qualified for the H-1B. However, you want to look at the amount of support that you're going to get in that transfer from your new employer.
yeah.
Also, really think about weigh the benefits of the regular H-1B job. So, having worked within institutions and within the for-profit sector, there are very big differences, and so there are things that I love about each of them. So you need to sort of figure that out for yourself. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
All
All
right.
right, everyone.
Thank
Yeah.
you for your great questions and for making
Yeah.
Minna and myself think. We wish
Yeah.
the best to you in your job hunt and your PR H-1B, because we do believe that non-domestic talent is vital to our country and our
Yeah.
work. Okay. All
Thank
right.
you so much. Thank you,
Bye, everyone. We'll see
everyone.
you again.
Bye. Bye.